Welcome back to the RRP TV. This is the Behind the Headphones series, an intimate exploration of different DJs, their life, the things that make them tick. We're here in Fabric London with DJ Oneman, artist behind the One Dance series, and also NTS resident. Right, so let's start with your early life. So you're born in Streatham Hill. What was it like growing up around there? So the area and all of that?
I was really, I mean, looking back at it, it was really interesting because London at the time was well, and it still is now, is quite mixed, right? But both the schools I went to in Streatham, primary school and secondary school, were both like extremely quite non-white, and I was like, I would consider myself a minority in the schools. But it made me who I am, and I loved it. Like growing up around different music and different fashion, and it kind of completely made me who I am. It was quite dark, like around 98 to 2002. There's a lot of like street robbery and stuff like that, and it just had this sort of like dark cloud over it. But the escapes that you had through things like music and fashion, and like going to JD Sports and getting your new tracksuit, or Sports and Things, which was like an independent sports shop in Streatham. Go there and get your new trainers. You know, we'd go to Big Apple in Croydon to get our records. I mean, there was escapes through it, but it did feel like quite a dark time around then. But I fully enjoyed it, and it fully made me who I am.
So did that sort of multiculturalism and I guess diversity, that's obviously quite reflective in your music as well. So
yeah.
What were your like early influences? Like what sort of sounds? What?
I mean, in secondary school, when you're like 13, 14 years old and you're starting to get into proper music, it was like you were either going to be a goth, a skater, or a grunger, or you're a pirate radio kid. And the sort of friends that I had, they were all sort of pirate radio kids. They either wanted to be MCs, or they wanted to be DJs, or they were just sort of infatuated by something illegal, which was like graffiti or pirate radio. So yeah, it was mainly just sort of the pirate radio stations that were around you at that time, because pirate radio was very localised. Like if you were in Streatham, you could maybe pick up Delight FM that were in Battersea or Clapham, up front that were in Stockwell. You know, you couldn't get Freak FM or Rinse. Those stations were way too far out for it to even reach to South West London. So when I got my first car when I was 17, like a lot of kids when they get their first car, they're going out down to Brighton or whatever. We were going to East London to park our cars under train arches so we could listen to Rinse. That's how important it was for us.
So the pirate radio stuff, what sort of sounds was that? So for someone like me, that's before my time. So
yeah.
Talk us through a bit about that pirate radio and that sort of stuff. I
mean, so I would have been 14 in the year 2000, so that's when I was sort of starting to get into pirate radio. So I think like the 4/4 garage sound had kind of tailed off a bit. It was like the dawn of this new millennium that kind of made the garage sound and the garage producers think about things in a different way. I think coming out of a decade into a new one always has this switch in electronic music. And at the time then, it kind of went from this really sexy, sleeky, feminine sound to a more masculine, quite hard, a lot of bass lines, a lot of MCs, very scatty rhythms. That was kind of my pirate radio was looking out for DJs at MCs or crews like that, like Red Alert crew on Delight were a big one for me back in the day. Because they were one of the first ones to bring through MCs in numbers, like big numbers, and it felt a bit more raw and a bit more rugged.
And was pirate radio as sort of rough and ready as like you've obviously got programs like People Do Nothing that, but were you running around hiding from the police, or was it not like that? So
yeah, I mean, personally for me, my first interest in going on pirate radio was in school, and it was on Red Alert's show on Delight, because MC Kiss was in my class, and I never actually went for it. Looking back now, I think I was a bit shook about going to a block in Battersea and having my records nicked in the lift. You can imagine now that's just not a thing you think about. Yeah. But back then, you know, if you had the hot dub plate or the hot tunes, like people would want them, yeah. the first pirate station I was on was React FM in Hammersmith, which was run by Henny G, who is kind of a legend in the pirate scene. He actually was also a consultant on People Just Do Nothing. And that was in Hammersmith under the train arches. I was there for about a year or two. Had a great time. It was Sunday, 6 till 8, after Rusco, and then just before a crew from Essex called Fuse Forces, who used to play dubstep. And then about 2 years into being on React, Sarah from Princz gave me a call and she was like, oh, we want you to join the station. And the rest was history from there.
So it also sounds like, obviously you mentioned that you're in school with some of these kids. Like, how young were you guys when it? Because it sounds actually like you're doing this at a pretty young age. Like,
yeah.
For me, I only started getting into music properly when I sort of went to university. But it sounds like you were like fully involved, or at least starting to get involved at a very young age.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember my best mate Andy, when he was 14, got asked for a pair of decks for his birthday. He was the only child, so he got what he wants, sort of thing. And then about 3 months into it, he's like, no, I just want to be an MC. And he started writing lyrics, and I kind of used to go around his all the time. So I picked up the DJ role and started mixing his records. A year later, that was me, man. I was like, right, I want to get into this. 15th birthday, set of belt drive turntables, a Citronics mixer. I'm sure some people remember those. And like 6 records. And then all my lunch money from school, or after school money that you get given by your mum and dad, all went on records. And we'd skip French lesson and get the 201 bus down to Figs Marsh to A&D Sounds and just stand in the shop being like, yo, what's that one? What's that one? What's that?
Well, I don't know. Did you know at the time, like, because obviously you got people like Scream, Ben Gurv, like all these guys are all South London as well. Were you guys all hanging around back then?
No.
Did no one know this was going on?
Not at all. And that was the weirdest thing, was even the records I was buying when I was 14, 15 years old, they were like LB Records, Sovereign, Brass Tooth. These were all producers from South West London. LB actually had his ghost studios on the road next to where I grew up, from the age of like 1 till 12 when I think we moved house. And it was literally around the corner. But you had no idea that all these tracks that you were buying were from the manor where you're from. I often think these days, was there a distributor that just went around South London putting South London producers in the record shops? Or was it wider than that? Because I never went to record shops in North London or West. So
do you think, like, obviously you mentioned earlier as well, like pirate radio sort of, they could only cast a signal so far. Do you think that do you think that I guess that would have created a scene and a hub? Do you think, like, now with like social media, that scene, could you replicate that scene further afield with people taking up music?
Not in a pirate way. I mean, the interesting thing with pirate is the localization of it. Like, there's a radio show I used to listen to called the Live Callers, So Solid Live Callers show on Sundays on Delight FM. And then I've got some recordings of it, and there's one where a girl rings up, because it's the Live Callers show, so you just ring up, you shout out your mates, maybe request a tune, put the phone down. And every time someone would ring up the station, Neutrino or Romeo or Mega Man, whoever was hosting it, would say, yo, you're live, where you calling from, how's it sounding? And this girl's like, oh yeah, I'm from London. And they all start laughing, because you could only hear it in London. To think of that now is just like, it completely doesn't exist anymore. And I think it was around 05, 06 when Rinse went onto the internet and you could listen to Rinse anywhere in the world. The localization sort of dropped out. And I don't think it could ever get it back. No.
So do you think that pirate radio is sort of almost a beautiful thing preserved in history?
I mean, yeah, it is, but I do wish it was documented a bit more. I know that you and Spencer's taken a few photos at Delight FM back in the day. Luke Hyams as well, the guy that he produced Dubplate Drama, which is on Channel 4. He's got a few clips on his YouTube channel of like Delight FM raves, but there's not much apart from people's tapes that they're hiding in their shoeboxes.
Yeah.
There's nothing really, and there's quite a few YouTube rips, but there's nothing really out there other than that, I don't think.
So let's talk about Rinse. That's obviously still a big part of you as a DJ and your career. That Rinse and Fabric, both where we are today, both championed you as, I guess, like sort of almost not a newcomer, but you're still finding your legs in the scene. Yeah. Do you think there's enough places now with it being so much of an industry now that should champion newcomers? Do you think there's enough?
So I think it's, personally with me, I think it was like there was a lot of hard work that I did to get where I was, but also a bit of time and place factor, and new scenes coming through, being given opportunities, like actually actively going to raves and meeting people. You go to Forward and you'd meet 3 people from radio stations, and you only really had to keep that relationship up a little bit to be sort of given a chance back then. But I feel like nowadays there are things like, Boiler Room still does their bit. I think like Keep Hush is great as well. I think they kind of picked up where Boiler Room left off in terms of the underground stuff. I think there's stuff out there, but it's going to be a lot harder to just break through as just a DJ these days.
So I got another question for you then. I guess with this whole situation now, like there's no gigs, no one can get on a flight. Do you think it's like this whole sort of lockdown process could actually, or will it make a grassroots scene more fertile again? Or because if a DJ can't get on a flight, does that mean people got to focus on how they make that lineup?
Everything has to be localised again. Like if you're from South East London, you're going to play at Tolar or Ministry. Or if you live in North London or in Islington, you might play at Camden Assembly. Or I think that's the way it could possibly go. With these Islington's a green zone, but Southwark's an amber zone. So I can't fly out to like Jersey or somewhere, but I can play at Tolar. But if I then go to Islington, am I going to, because I'm in an amber zone, am I going to be allowed to play there or not? Things like that. I don't see much underground stuff, movement stuff coming out, but basically because of how heavily surveillanced everything is now, and you've got people grassing on each other, as you all know.
Playing case.
Yeah, shout at neighbours. But I can see things getting localised again. It's not going to be bad.
As like, obviously you've come up through the start of and the end of a couple of scenes, so you've sort of caught at different scenes, they moved into each other. Do you think like music now and the scene in general pays like homage to where it comes from? Or do you think it even needs to? Do you think it push?
I think it does. I think the sound that's sort of been popular over the last few years, especially in Ibiza with Harvey's Party at Pikes and Glitterbox and stuff like that, like the disco sound coming back and this whole like Studio 54 revival thing. There's definitely people sort of paying that homage to it, because you can't forget this all came out of gay, black and Latino men in New York and Chicago that had nowhere to go. And it was like, Larry Levan, David Mancuso, Nicky Siano, The Loft, The Gallery, Paradise Garage. These were all like safe places for these people to go. Like these kids were getting chucked out of their house because they told their parents they were gay and they had nowhere to go. I mean, in terms of now with that, taking the music aside, there's definitely like, the Pussy Palace is great for the safe space parties, for POCs and sexual orientations difference. There's a lot of stuff holding that up for those communities and where this all fucking came from. And as long as it's still there, it's always going to be important for people to. I mean, I can't really have a mad opinion on it because I've never noticed that the clubs I've been to or the festivals I've gone to or the people I know, they've never been sort of anti anything. It's always been a very inclusive thing. But in terms of the music, I can see like the original sounds very, very popular again. Yeah, for sure.
So you yourself are much more a DJ than you are a producer. So what I guess you call like a pure DJ. Do you think it's still possible for people to be like that in the scene, or is it an impossible challenge?
Well, when I came through with Jackmaster, Ben, Josie Rebel, Moxie, there wasn't really many other people doing it at that time. All the people who used to go and see it Forward or DMZ or parties, like any parties at Corsica, Code 9, like they were all producer DJs. They used to do a bit of both. My approach as a pure DJ was literally, I was just playing vinyl. I was playing only records from my collection. I didn't even cut dub plates. So my approach to it was always from the record shop angle, or just going into record shops, buying stuff, taking it home, mixing it together, and trying to find a way for them to make sense. If they were different, or if they weren't, then keys and timing's so important with it. I've never really been that attracted to the production side of things. I've done a few remixes and I've done loads of edits. I find edits really fun. I've done a remix for Mount Kimby that came out on Warp about 5 years ago. But that's pretty much it, man. And these days, no, I just don't know how you, without a scene existing, because this is what you've got to remember with garage, dubstep, grime, even up to UK funky, which I believe was the last true scene, which was, there were record shops, there were vinyl releases, there were club nights, there were, kids would dress up to go to funky raves. They would wear tracksuits all week, and they'd go and get a nice shirt and a nice bit of aftershave, go and chat with some girls. And that these were scenes and I think without the scenes, where does the DJ just fit in?
So would you say the DJ's almost lost his power?
Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%. I mean, nowadays with things like Spotify and YouTube mixes and stuff from back in the day, like there's a lot more nostalgia with DJs. I don't know where I could go and hear a new DJ, or without just going on to, I don't know, like Represent Radio or Playback or something that's on the radio dial or on the internet, but I don't know how they would become a part of the scene, or how they would get recognised as being part of this scene when there is no scene to be a part of.
I've been having chats with various people recently, and one of the things I found quite interesting is how people define success. And a lot of, I'd say, people that have been around the scene a bit longer, their definition of success in the scene has sort of changed. So that how do you characterise success in the scene? Is it something you even look at yourself, or?
Yeah, no, I've never really have. I would define success in the scene as people wanting you to play at their clubs, and that's something I've been lucky enough to experience. Is I'm just a little guy from South West London that played garage and dubstep, and then in 2010 when Boiler Room came around and Serato came around, when I changed my style, that was then a sort of step up from what I was already doing. So I mean, I don't see success outside of that in terms of like adoration, or how many people are cheering for you, or how many people are filming you these days. It's more, for me, it's more like what have I achieved? What have I achieved personally? Like I've played at some of the best clubs in the world. I've done a party for Fabric on the top of a mountain in an igloo in Austria. Like, these things for me are like, wow, I've been a part of that. And that's to me, that's what my success is, just having been a part of something that I don't feel like kids could be a part of again.
Kids now, I think they almost think there's a roadmap to success. And do you think people underestimate the hard work and the stuff like the networking and that goes into actually, it's not just, you don't just make music and become famous.
No, it's what we were just talking about, being part of a scene as well, I think. And we'd go down to the nightclubs, we'd go in there, there'd be Forward when we started going in 2004 was like 12 blokes in a room, and they were all there for one reason, was to hear the music and listen to it on the sound system. And I don't know, I feel like kids want everything a bit quicker without doing the work. Someone asked me a few months ago, like, oh, you know, I want to get into DJ and I haven't done a gig yet, but, you know, how much should I charge for my first gig? It's like, bruh, how about nothing? How about you just do it, get in there, get a feel for it, you're going to be nervous, impress some people, and then put a few mixtapes out, get a radio show, punt it around to some agencies. I don't know how it works these days. I was lucky enough that the agent that I was with for a very, very long time, who also was a big key to my success, just happened to come to DMZ when I played the first time. And I played 5 till 6 in the morning, graveyard shift is what we used to call it, and I was probably the only one playing garage at a dubstep rave at that time. It was very male heavy, so come 5 in the morning, all the guys that come with their girlfriends that are just like on the sides because they hate this masculine music, all of a sudden came on the dance floor because I was playing garage at 5 in the morning. And it was things like that that really got me recognition, was taking complete risks. And you know, when you take a risk and it pays off.
This idea of risk, do you think that's what makes a great DJ as well? Because I don't think it's just music, but it tends to be the people that take risks that tend to succeed as well. Do you think that's part of what makes a great DJ?
Yeah, I do, man. I do. I think the risks are really important. Without, for me personally, without taking those risks in a live setting, like literally playing 2 tracks that you know are going to work together, but you've never tried them before, is really important, and it makes you feel alive. For me, it makes me feel alive in a setting that in your head you've got this track that you're going to mix into the last one. You know it's probably going to make a big impact, and then you try it, and then the crowd reaction you get back from that is sort of your reward, I guess, for taking that risk. You know, sometimes it doesn't always pay off, but when you take a big risk and it does, for me it definitely separates the greats from the rest. Yeah.
All right. So then let's talk about, so a lot of people, like your career's always up and down. No one can ever do anything and think it's going to be all plain sailing. What's the sort of hardest thing you've had to overcome in your career, and how do you sort of get through that?
In terms of the music that I play, probably like a lack of identity, which I think most of us DJs that play across the board sort of do struggle with at some points in your career. You know, you get known for doing certain things a bit more than others, or you know, I had a period where I was playing like Sonar and Exit and Giles Peterson's Worldwide, playing really left field dance stuff. But then, you know, 2-3 years later, I was doing quite a lot harder sets, the back-to-backs with Manu Leng, and then you swing the pendulum, you keep swinging the pendulum this way and that way, and it becomes a lot harder to either stay in the middle or go the way you want to go. So I've definitely struggled with the identity thing in terms of the music. And then, I mean, outside of the music, the biggest thing I've had to overcome is like drug addictions, really, and like hedonism in clubs and relapses. I went to rehab for 2 weeks in 2017, came out, did 6 months clean, did a tour in Australia. No one out there knew that I'd been to rehab. Boom, straight away, I drew a line. And it was like this 10-second, like, do I do it, do I not? It happened. And that's one thing I've always struggled with, is like the more addiction problems with, not with being in the club, it was more the stuff afterwards, like Xanax and shit. Yeah.
Do you think that's a problem for the scene, is like that the scene as a whole has to try and combat as well? Because it's the lifestyle, and it's no matter whether you're a DJ or a clubber, doesn't suit healthy living by definition. It's hedonistic and that. Yeah. But you do see a lot more DJs now that are sober and that. Do you think it's something the scene should be more aware of? Or? Yeah,
definitely. I think it needs to be talked about a lot more, and I also think that, I mean, look, the Code 9 does his O event at Corsica, right? Where it's like room 2 will just be an art installation, and it's sort of, you know, some sound and some visuals. it's a reason to go to a club and not get fucked up. You know, I think what we could see more of now is stuff like that, and using these spaces in different ways. Fabric that we're sitting in now can't be open at the moment because it's not financially viable for them to have 60 people in a 1,000 capacity room, but spaces like this could be used for other stuff, you know.
Well, so you've got Berghain's open at the moment as an art gallery, and they've invited people down there for that. And I think you're right. I think there's also actually a bit more money came into the industry as it is now an industry, and so you've got big venues that have started spending shit tons of money on lighting and production. But that's also, I think personally, created a bit of or shone a light on these are actually artists themselves. Like if you look at the people that do the light show for Dixon, for example, or the guys at Panorama Bar, like they're artists in themselves, and I think there needs to be more of a
100%. I've always said that the two most important people in the club, in the club, is the lighting guy and the sound guy. Like the DJs, we play the music, but any DJ could come and play that music. Like the sound guy keeps it sounding good, makes sure the levels are right on the dance floor and in the booth. The lighting guy is as important. Anytime I play at a club, when I was doing my XOYO residency, my 13-week residency there, the first thing I would do is go and see the lighting guy and the sound guy, be like, what's going on tonight? Have you got everything sorted? Because these are artists as well. In their own right, they are as important. They're unsung heroes, actually, of the scene.
I couldn't agree more.
Because they sit behind their little computer on their desk and they make the whole fucking experience a lot better than if they weren't there. I'll tell you that.
And this is it. Like if your lights don't match the drop that you're putting in, or it does affect the whole experience. Like it isn't just the sounds. Like if you are under the influence, those lights change your totally your perception of it. Yeah. And I think, like you say, if you're coming sober as well, that you can't just stand in a dark room with like bass music playing, because it doesn't work like that. So these things are elements that, for me anyway, that should be.
Yeah, in terms of the bigger clubs and stuff, definitely. I mean, Plastic People was literally a dark room. You know, it was 300 capacity, pitch black, tiny little orange light above the decks, big functional one sound system, tweeters in each corner, 2 bass bins on opposite corners. And it worked for us, because it was what you do in those dark situations, in those dark corner clubs, what we call hole in the wall clubs, are like, you lose all your inhibitions, because I can't see you can't see me. We know we're in the same space because we can sort of feel each other's energy, and we're all being carried around by this music. It's like, for me, but that was one of the most beautiful experiences in a club, was being in the pitch black. Like plunged into darkness with like heavy bass weight. It was kind of, felt like you're in the womb.
Do you think that's also, I guess, why like electronic music is, it sort of transcends borders, doesn't it? Do you think that's why? Because it's almost, like you say there, if you're in that pitch black, it's that almost animalistic.
Yeah, I think you're left to your own devices, aren't you? And like, what do you want those to be when you're in a club just listening to that sort of music? You just want to have a smile on your face, dance, and know that there's some people around you that you love, or you could go on your own. I mean, like clubs are can be a place for like lonely people to meet, like-minded souls. Like, I think there's a beauty in nightlife and nightclubs that I really hope we get back after all this, but I'm really not sure.
I saw someone talking the other day about there's always a revival in arts in general after downtimes, because people, they have nothing left basically, and it's what they turn to. So do you think that could be something that comes out of this? Maybe not instantly, maybe we're going to take some time.
I think it's going to take some time, but it will happen. We're going through a great sort of renaissance period at the moment with UK Garage, I think, and I'd love to see there be a sort of little scene come back from that. Like, there's a lot of great labels putting some really good stuff out. Like, I'm a big fan of Instinct, Sneaker Social Club, Dansu Discs. There's some really good labels, producers like Interplanetary Criminal from Manchester, Soul Mass Transit System. I love all the breaky stuff at the moment, like Ski Mask and what all those guys are doing. Doom Chakra Tapes in Germany, Brothers from Different Mothers Records. There's all these great labels and so much good music being put out, but there's fucking nowhere to hear it. And this is the problem at the minute. 2020, for me, for electronic music that I'm into, has been better than the last 3 years, easily. The stuff I've got this year, with nowhere to fucking play it, has been amazing.
And for a creative industry, dance music's not actually that creative. And there's a bit of me that hopes, like, in tough times, that's where people have got to get creative. Like you see people, like in Streatham Hill, for example, when all the capacities got cut on the restaurants, there was a roadblock, and people were putting their tables out there. Like, that sort of creativity is what, there's always going to be people that find a way around. And for me, I hope that's what happens in the music. I hope we get a bit more creative. And that's not just like the producers, that's like the promoters need to start doing it.
I hope so too, but I just worry about the whole surveillance aspect of everything now. Not only just like, I'm not even just talking about CCTV or, you know, I heard that they were flying a drone over MOT the other week just to see what was going on there, and I've heard stories of helicopters being flown over Walthamstow warehouses with thermal cameras just to see who's in there, but more the surveillance coming from us, like us being in a place where we need to be. We shouldn't be there, but we're still broadcasting it on Instagram story, or, you know, we just need to stop doing all that. You know, when we go out, we need to just know where we're going, why we're going, leave our phones at home, get our mates together and go out and have a fucking good time.
This is it.
And I think that's the only way that it could get creative, is if you stopped all the self-surveillance.
This is it. I think people don't understand the consequences of their actions sometimes as well. That's the issue. I think their one video that they put up, you even see it in Berghain and a place like that. There's always one person that's trying to do a sneak. Everyone's clocked them doing it. And it's a little bit like, come on, like, we're all in this together. But I think people just get lost in their own thing as well, and they can't see that bigger picture always, which is a shame, because there's so much exciting stuff that could be happening without that. But I don't know. I think, well, it take the illegal scene in London just before lockdown, it was thriving. But I'd say all the people that are actually running those parties were pretty responsible. Like they clean up their stuff afterwards. They weren't doing it in residential places. Like they spent a lot of time choosing a location. But since lockdown, it's not those guys throwing the parties that everyone's complaining about in Daily Mail. It's all the people that are frustrated they can't do them in the clubs, and they come and they're reckless. And it's those people that are now put all these £10,000 fines in place. And it's, the scene's meant to be about looking after each other.
But that's what it started as. Like, if you go back to the roots of rave, and I mean, in this country, especially in this country, sort of late 80s to early 90s was all about unity. And these raves back then actually, like, not, you know, like kids from London and kids from Hertfordshire, you know, the kids from London the white kids would have a lot of black and Asian mates, but the kids from Hertfordshire probably never seen a black face in their life. But going to a rave, they would all come together for the first time. And I think things like that, you would never have something like that again, but purely based on the things we've got in our pockets. Like, and it's actually, we've actually gone quite far from that point anyway. It's just in terms of coming together as people at a party, it's just, it couldn't be different now, or even last year, than it was when it all started out. I honestly think it's a really interesting thing, and like, I think you could talk about it endlessly, to be honest with you. It's the same as like the reason they said like doctors were in football firms, and like doctors and lawyers, because you go there and they fall under this collective mentality. And it's the same when you're at a dance party, at a rave. It's the same thing. You all sort of thought like you said, unity, and you're that one person, one rule, one culture sort of thing. You're literally you're part of a movement. You're part. You might not necessarily think it before you go there or afterwards, but when you're there, you can feel it. You're part of something. You know, you're part of something quite magical, and you're part of something that only these people here are a part of as well. So it feels that extra special.
So thanks for watching the RRP TV. Thanks to DJ Oneman for coming down. You can subscribe somewhere along here. We'll catch you next week.